and welcome to another episode of Coast Connections. As ever, we're coming to you from the Sunemu First Nation territory here on Vancouver Island, which is also the chosen home of the Mid-Island Métis Nation, and we're very happy to work, live, and play in this beautiful area. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of inviting Batman and Batwoman onto our show. I know, they were hard to find, hard to source, but we got them. We're going to be dispelling all kinds of myths about bats and some of the amazing things that these pollinators do and how we're conserving them and preserving them, and the roles that you can play too in helping with bats here on Vancouver Island. So let us welcome Julianna Laposa-Wilde, Batwoman. Welcome to the studio, Julianna.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And your partner in crime, Batman, is Tim Ennis. Hello, Tim. Nice to see you.
Evening. Nice to see you too. Thank you for having me as well.
You're very welcome. And Tim, from what territory are you coming to us today from?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm coming to you today from Cumberland in the traditional territory of the Comox First Nation.
Very good. Welcome. So let's dispel some of these common myths. I mean, this program is going to be airing around Halloween, and there's, the myth that, someone's blind as a bat, or every bat, will suck blood from whatever they find. And, bats always have rabies. And what's the truth behind some of this? Are bats really blind, Tim?
No, not at all. Bats have eyes that see quite well, but it's not their eyes that they use when they're flying around at night, trying to forage and feed and carry on with their lives. It's what we call echolocation. Is the echolocation. That's right. Bats aren't the only organism that use echolocation. Of course, some of your viewers would be familiar with things like dolphins and certain whales that also use echolocation. But bats make an ultrasonic sound that then bounces off of the objects in their environment and creates a mental picture in their mind, which is quite like seeing, which is how they're able to navigate the darkness.
Very cool. And their eyes are actually quite large because most of them have a very small body. And what is it about their eyes that makes them able to see in the dark so well?
It's really not about their eyes at all. It's more about their ears. Some bats have tremendously sized ears compared to an animal so small, and it's the echolocation and the echo of the sonic ultrasonic sounds they make that actually paint the picture in their mind, enabling them to see. They have eyes and they can see, but I think the eyes are sort of not used as much as maybe the ears in terms of being able to see in the dark.
Now, there's about 1,600 different species of bats in the world. And how many do we have here in BC or on the island?
Yeah, it's interesting. In across the world, I've heard 1,200, but maybe it's 1,600 species of bat globally, which represents a significantly large portion of the different kinds of mammals that actually occur on Earth. So about 20% of mammal species are bats. Which is a pretty significant proportion. Here in British Columbia, we have 16 species that we think of as being like naturally occurring. There can be some species that fly in periodically that don't really reside here. We call them accidental species. So that number 16 might go up to sort of 20. But we have more bats here than any other jurisdiction in Canada, more than any other place in Canada. And here on Vancouver Island, we have about 12 species that we think of as naturally occurring. So a pretty significant amount of bat diversity here on the island. And about half of the species that occur in British Columbia are considered species at risk, so endangered species. So they're an incredibly important group of animals, both ecologically and from a biodiversity conservation perspective.
Wow. And when I was doing my research, the biggest bat is the flying fox, I believe, and with a 2-meter wingspan. That's massive. And the smallest, to my surprise, was the Bumblebee bat, which is the size of a bumblebee and weighs about 2 grams. Who knew?
Yeah, all the diversity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen a bumblebee bat, Julianna?
I have not actually seen a bumblebee bat. I would love to.
A flying
Yeah.
fox. Where are those located in the world?
You'll find flying foxes in places like Australia. The golden crowned flying fox is perhaps one of the biggest bats, and it's known from Australia. Those are what we call mega bats. They're often fruit eaters or fruit bats, and so yeah, you'll find them in tropical places like that. The bumblebee bat, incidentally, is also known from Thailand and Myanmar, so quite far from where we're located.
Is that a bat I'm hearing in the background?
I wish.
It's a baby bat. Welcome. That's okay. We like viewers of all ages here and participants.
We can do that again if you need to.
That's okay. Vampire bats. I think this is why the whole blood-sucking thing, is part of the myth, Transylvanian Dracula and bats. But there's only one bat out of those 1,600 species that actually drinks blood, correct?
I think there's more than one species, but it's a very small proportion of the overall biodiversity of bats. I think it's like 1.5% of bat species are in that category, and none of those occur here. And Halloween is kind of a funny time for us bat biologists, because it's great when we have a lot of public enthusiasm for bats, but you'll often see the classic Halloween iconography of the full moon with bats flying in front of it, and that's a bit of an urban myth. Bats really do not like the moonlight. It's very seldom that bats will fly on a full moon. It's also very seldom that they will fly in October, especially later in the month when things are cold. They're starting to head into hibernation. So we're really excited about the attention that bats get during the Halloween season. But it's the least likely time that you'll actually see one.
Interesting. Let's introduce viewers to a few types of these bats. We've got this cute, cute is a subjective term, a hoary bat. What an interesting face. What kind of bat is it? Like, where does this hoary bat live?
Yeah, hoary bats are really interesting. They're a migratory bat. And so, a lot of people might not realize that some of the bats that we have here on the island are, hibernating bats, as you kind of expect, might hibernate in a tree or a cave. But hoary bats are a migratory species, so they'll live here during the summer months and then migrate south. We're not exactly how far. We're not sure how far our hoary bats will go, but it could be into the southern states or into Central America. And they're a fairly large-bodied bat that really eats, I think, mostly moths and bigger, harder-shelled insects. But yeah, an absolutely incredible species. Scientists have modeled that this is a species that will probably go extinct within 50 years because of the impacts of wind energy projects. So because of their migratory pattern, they're really impacted by flying into wind turbines, which seems to be causing significant mortality in hoary bats in Midwestern North America. So the data that we have here on Vancouver Island suggests that they're a pretty common element of our forested ecosystems, but a species of concern for sure.
Wow. The little brown myotis, I think this one lives actually in the Okanagan area too. What can you tell us about this little cutie?
Yeah, the little brown myotis is probably our most common bat species here on Vancouver Island. In the research that we've done, we find more little brown bats than we find anything else. But they're also listed as endangered in Canada. And the reason why is because there's a fungal pathogen or a disease, which we refer to as white nose syndrome, that was introduced to Eastern North America back in about 2006. And that disease called white nose syndrome has been spreading across the continent from east to west. It has not yet arrived here, but it causes population collapses in excess of 90% in hibernating bats, such as the little brown bat. And so it's been listed endangered in Canada, although it still remains the most common bat, probably in BC, or at least in southern BC, because the disease hasn't quite reached here yet. So it's a bit of a race against time, to be honest. We have a a cure, if you will, for white nose syndrome that's just kind of undergoing clinical trials and field trials. So with any luck, we'll be able to find out where those bats are hanging out and treat them with the prophylactic vaccine, essentially, and keep the populations healthy here locally.
So, Daddy, there's that's actually a myth then, that white nose syndrome is related to the cocaine trade from Colombia.
Yes.
Okay, we'll bust that myth right here.
Actually,
as well.
it's funny. Like one hypothesis is that it was actually brought over from Europe to North America on cheese that was aged in caves in Europe, where the fungus that causes white nose syndrome is called Pseudoastis destructans, and that fungus we think ended up on cheese that was aged in a cave in France per se, and then that cheese was brought over and aged in a cave in New York for further aging, and that's where that fungus was first established in North America. That's a hypothesis that scientists are still working on, but regardless, the introduction of that fungus from Europe has caused what is probably the largest wide-scale wildlife disease episode in North America's history, with literally tens of millions of bats dying as a consequence of the introduction of that disease.
That's so tragic, because bats play such an important part in the ecosystem, don't they, Julianna? Their role. Yeah.
Yeah, bats are incredibly important for ecosystems. They perform crucial ecosystem services for pest control, agricultural and forest pests. And it's estimated that in Canada, bats actually provide, I think it's like $3 to $4 billion in natural pest control services. And they're also responsible for pollination, seed dispersal, and they even provide some medicines as well.
That's incredible. We have a beautiful shot here of a bat getting some nectar from a plant here. And I was just struck by the beautiful wing of this bat. It's just stunning. The symmetry of it, the shape, it just speaks to the beauty of these species and how important they are and how fragile they are as well. So let's talk a little bit about the good work that you're doing out in the communities with bat boxes. And who knew, there's also something called a rocket box. Do tell.
Yeah, so bat boxes, they're artificial roosts, and they're designed to encourage bats into areas where natural roosts don't no longer remain. And this is a great way to provide habitat for the bats if their roosts are destroyed from deforestation or development, or sometimes they need to be evicted from people's homes. Yeah, they're an essential part of managing bats and providing habitat in urban and rural areas.
Now, the bat boxes, are you putting some kind of bait in those to attract them? How do the bats get into the boxes?
Yeah, so unfortunately we're not able to attract bats to the boxes. We kind of put them up in areas where we hope that bats will find them and use them. Bats actually return to the same roost every year. So when we're doing bat exclusions from homes, we try to put them up in areas that are nearby where they were roosting before.
There's an interesting shot of one of your workers or volunteers putting a bat box up on top of a barn, and the barn is open at the top, and yet the bat box is here. Why wouldn't the bat go into the big barn rather than the box?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I imagine that the entry point was probably blocked off, so they wouldn't be able to access the barn, and so hopefully they would enter into the bat box. And that bat box on the barn is a maternity box. So we have two types of bat boxes, the maternity box, which goes on the sides of buildings, and then the other picture that you were showing is a rocket box, and that one goes up on a pole in an open area.
And Julianna, how many bats would a female bat have in 1 year? And what are they called, their babies?
Their babies are called pups, which is super adorable, and they will have one to two pups a year. Most only have one, so it makes them very vulnerable to population decline.
Very small. When your little one asks for a puppy there, Tim, what are you going to bring home?
She's already she's a bat girl, I think is what we might call her on this show. She's an up and coming bat biologist for sure.
Very good. Now, Comox just became the first certified bat community in BC, which is super interesting. How does one get that designation, and what does that mean for Comox?
Well, just a point of clarification there. The town of Comox has become the first bat-friendly community on Vancouver Island. There are a few other bat-friendly communities that have been designated, including Delta, Dawson Creek, Port Moody, etc. And so the Bat-Friendly Community Program is an initiative through the BC Community Bat Program that really promotes local governments to take measures to enhance and support bat populations within their jurisdictions. And this might include things like providing information to homeowners about bats, providing education and outreach materials to local residents, and taking measures to support bat habitats directly through perhaps the installation of bat boxes or the protection of really important bat habitats. And so the town of Comox is demonstrating leadership here on Vancouver Island by being the first bat-friendly community here on the island, and we're really happy to see them succeed with that program.
Very nice. And there's a nice shot here of a night training with a group of people with some bat boxes around. And Julianna, what does that involve when you're training volunteers?
Yeah, so that's a picture from the annual bat count, and the annual bat count runs in June, July, and early August. There's 4 dates for the bat count, and so that just involves going out to known roosts and counting the bats, and this helps biologists monitor bat populations.
So you mean to tell me that the bats will let me get that close? Like if I'm going, I imagine I'm going out at night to count them, but a volunteer can get how close to the bats? Yeah,
so you don't want to get too close to the bat box, but they know where you are, so they will avoid you.
Okay.
You kind of just stand back and let them come out of the box, and it's really fascinating to see. I highly encourage everybody to participate if you can and you're interested.
And in that picture we have of the bat box, they're really, really close together. Some are upside down, some are right side up. But do they like to be that cozy, shall we say?
Yeah, I think they like to be cozy for warmth. They like to have a warm place to roost. And you'll see that bat box there has multiple chambers. And so that allows them to move around for thermoregulation.
Very interesting. And we've got a couple other pictures of some interesting types of bats. The Yuma myotis bat. This little fella's on a log with his wings sort of resting like he's taking a bit of a break. Where does this one live?
Yeah, Yuma myotis is one of our fairly common bats here on Vancouver Island. They're not a migratory bat. They hibernate here. They're an insectivorous bat. They really prey on smaller insects, typically like mosquitoes and caddisflies and things like that. To hold one in your hand with a little brown bat in the other hand, you won't be able to physically tell them apart. They're really, really similar, but the echolocation calls they make are very different. So when we record them, we can tell one from the other. They often even cohabitate in roost colonies as well. So they're a very typical element of the bat biota that we have here on Vancouver Island, and they're small and extremely just super interesting.
And each bat species then has their own dialect, shall we say, or?
Yeah, it's in a sense it's kind of like birds. Like if you go outside and you hear a raven, you know it's a raven. If you hear a robin, you know it's a robin. And bats have a similar thing going on with their echolocation calls. So the calls that they make, we record using ultrasonic microphones, because the sounds that they're making are not detectable to the human ear. So we need these ultrasonic microphones to be able to listen to them. And and so we can tell them apart by the way they sound. Wow. And sometimes that's easier to do than to tell them apart by the way they look. And so that's one of the principal instruments that we use in bat research is ultrasonic microphones. And so again, like I said, the Yuma myotis is not going to look any different from a little brown bat if you have one in your hand, but they're going to sound very different. So it's an interesting technology.
And are they a series of clicks? Is it screeches? What types of sound would bats make?
You know, it's kind of like salmon. When people talk about salmon, they think about like this big group of fish, but there's actually quite a lot of difference between, say, a sockeye and a chum. It's the same with bats. We think of them all as all the same kind of thing, but they're really not. They're quite different. Each species has its own life history traits, and each species does its own thing in terms of where it hangs out, where it forages, and so you know, every species is unique in terms of answering that question. They're entirely adapted to their own special, I guess, niche is what we would call it in the environment. Some of them are specialists on really big, large prey items like beetles and moths, and some of them really specialize on mosquitoes. And so as a result of that, the echolocation calls that they make are tuned to the prey that they're hunting for. So species that use really high frequency sounds are looking in a short distance ahead of them for very small things. Bats that are looking for bigger creatures like the moths and the beetles are using lower frequencies that travel farther, and they're looking for things that are maybe like 12, 15 meters in front of them. Wow. And so the echolocation calls they make are really distinctive, resulting from the type of prey that they're after.
Very, very similar to cetaceans then, to whales and humpbacks. Very similar communication. I wonder if the two species can communicate with each other.
Almost no chance. It's a fascinating thing because echolocation seems to have evolved at least twice, maybe more, without having a common ancestor that you know used echolocation. So it's an incredible thing.
Wow, we've got
scientifically interesting.
Yeah, we've got a nice shot here of a silver-haired bat. Is this one of the senior citizens or?
Well, like a lot of silver-haired people in our population, the silver-haired bat is a migratory species. So they travel south for the winter and you know, overwinter in warm places and then move back north again. And having said that, the silver-haired bats in southern Vancouver Island, where it is actually quite warm and mild during the winter, some of our local populations probably don't migrate at all. They probably just hang out here because this is a relatively mild climate. The ones that are really far north from, say, the Yukon or northern Alberta, they may go as far as Guatemala for the winter and that kind of thing. So we definitely notice a big pulse of activity in late September when the silver-haireds are moving through from the north to the south. But we also have a resident population that's active all year here on Vancouver Island.
Fascinating. And Julianna, we've got Bat Awareness Week coming up, October 24th to 31st. Tell us what you're preparing for that and what opportunities there are for viewers.
Yeah, so Bat Week, it's a week to raise awareness about conservation for bats. It's a time of year when bats are leaving, heading out for hibernation. It's a great time to do renovations. If that's something that you need to do. We also just encourage people to just spread the word about bats. Tell your friends and family about these amazing creatures. You can also go check out batweek.org for webinars and events happening in your community. If you can support HAT's Adopt a Bat campaign, which is running from the start of Bat Week until December 25th. And that just gives you the chance to adopt a bat species of your choice. And it promotes conservation, and it's a great opportunity.
What a good Christmas present.
Yeah.
You know, why not? Buy a bat, support a bat. Now, There's also the myth about, Julianna, with your beautiful long hair, about bats flying into hair. Is this a myth, or does this happen? And when it does happen, why?
That is absolutely a myth. With the bats have great vision, and they use echolocations, and they know where you are, and they do not want to fly into your hair as much as you don't want them to fly into your hair.
And what should we do if we find a bat on the siding of our house or on a wall? What do we do to safely get the bat removed from the property?
Yeah, so if you find a bat, the first thing is remember just not to come in contact with the bat. If you do have to move the bat, we recommend wearing protective wear like thick leather gloves. But it depends on the time of the year. But if you find a bat on the siding of your house or under your patio umbrella, they're usually just roosting on their way for hibernation. So they'll usually move on within. We recommend just leaving them where they are for a couple of days, and they'll usually move on.
Good advice. We just have a minute or two left. Closing thoughts and how you chose to be a bat expert. I mean, that's quite fascinating in itself. Any final words from first you, Tim?
Yeah, thanks. I think doing bat research and studying bats is kind of my nighttime job. My daytime job is actually protecting ecologically significant private land for conservation purposes. And so our entree into the moonlighting as a bat biologist really came from needing to understand where there are endangered species of bats on the landscape and trying to put conservation measures in place to protect them. And my early interest in bats was, snowballed, I think, after getting a little bit more involved in bat science. And so, I'm really excited to continue to do the work that I'm doing in private land conservation, and I'm really excited to carry on researching bats.
Well, we're really glad that you are, because this is definitely a species that is threatened and needs to be preserved. So congratulations on the good work that you're doing there. Julianna.
Yeah, I've always been just like super interested in working with animals, working with wildlife. I'm the wildlife stewardship coordinator at HAT, so we focus on a couple of different species at risk, but bats are one of my favorite. They're so wonderful, so important, and they're, very fascinating creatures that I love learning about.
And is there truth to the rumor that during Bat Week that there's going to be many badminton championships?
No.
Also a myth.
We'll bust that one too. Okay. This is starting to suck. Oh.
Very funny. We're excited to up here in the North Island. We're excited to be partnering with the with MARS, the Mountain Aviary Recovery Society, who's the wildlife hospital here, to do a presentation on bats for Bat Week on October 16th, open to the public. So if you live in the Comox-Courtney area, check out the MARS website for information on our public event.
Excellent. Thank you both for the work that you're doing, and we'll have more information on your website for our viewers, but we really appreciate you swooping in today and sharing your expertise with us. Batman and Batwoman, it's been a pleasure, and I wish you all the best, especially during Halloween season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The pleasure is all ours.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. And think about adopting a bat and, helping in any way that you can with the preservation of these amazing creatures here on the island. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Coast Connections.